Zero Carbon
East Talk.
Hello and welcome to Zero Carbon East Series 4, and this is the first of two specials. We've been live at the WOMAD Festival, Europe's #1 arts festival, tens of thousands of people in attendance, and of course, a special Ecotricity stage where myself and Dale Vince met up with a huge audience to take questions and have a bit of a conversation about all matters green. Good morning. I mean, we might as well start with the weather, Dale, really, because it's not raining. It was raining, and then it stopped raining. Then it was a bit windy, and then it stopped being windy and became sunny.
Yeah.
And then the sun went in and it rained again. And then now the sun is back out. But literally 2 minutes ago, it wasn't. So it's almost as if there's a climate crisis going on.
Yeah. I wonder.
Well, in fact, if you look at social, something we talk a lot about on the podcast, obviously, is climate by definition. But social media, of course, has opened up this whole kind of can of fairly nefarious worms of people who've got other ideas about the climate scam.
It's mad.
You've got to look around the world right now. I mean, this is quite timely that we're recording this and we're here this year when lots of really rather dark records are being broken weather-wise around the world.
Yeah. I mean, we're about to have the hottest July ever, aren't we? And records just keep tumbling. I mean, in the last month or so, it's all been about the heat, hasn't it? But we're having other records of, rain, floods, droughts, all that kind of stuff. But, I was on TalkSport Radio yesterday and bumped into another one of those people you're referring to there, Ian. Somebody that basically denies there's a crisis, denies denying it, but then goes on to deny it.
Hang on, denies denying it.
That's
That's
right.
that's a whole new level of denial, isn't it?
That's right. It's crazy, and it's hard to know. It's hard to know how to deal with these people. I met some people in Stroud last night. Actually, some very drunk people, and they were like telling me it's all a scam, and I'm being paid to talk about this climate crisis. It doesn't exist, and all I could do is shake my head and say you're crazy, because that's what I think. Right? Anybody right now that says there's not a climate crisis and it's not man-made and it's not driven by fossil fuels, they have to be crazy. They have to be not looking at the news. They have to be unaware of global events.
Was it you that said it, or I guess you did? We might come on to your appearance on Question Time a couple of weeks ago. We got a lot of comment in many different ways. Yeah. But was it you or somebody else said that people should go to jail for denying?
Oh yeah, that was me. Actually, I said it should be a crime. The example I used was the Holocaust. Right, it's illegal to deny the Holocaust. And what I said, I think I said it on air somewhere actually, that it should be a crime to deny this coming Holocaust, because the climate crisis will be far worse than that one, the one that we all know about. And we've made it illegal to deny it for good reasons. Why do we allow people to deny this climate crisis or to diffuse any clear recognition of the problem? Because all that does is hamper efforts to do something about it. It sows confusion. We have climate doubt around us, and what we need is clarity. We need everybody to understand and be told the same thing. It's like the BBC shouldn't give platform to climate deniers, for example. Nobody should. No radio station should either allow these people to get on the air. Thank you.
Shall we? I mean, it's worth. I wish I'd written a list of these actually, but I think we can probably make this work. But it's denial bingo, where there's some very sort of obvious things. Shall I start off with the first one?
Yeah, do it.
What about 1976? There you go.
Oh yeah, the hot summer. Yeah, that's a classic. In that we've had hot summers before. Okay. Our friend Julia Hartley Brewer, I heard she was in. Yeah. Well, that's funny. I know she's not really our friend, but she was in Italy.
She's over there, Dale.
She was in Italy there last week when the place was burning, around her ears. And at first she denied there was a problem. She said, "Oh, the smoke is coming from Mount Etna." And then some hours later, apparently, and then some hours later, when it was just undeniable, she was driving down the road, shot a little video, smoke everywhere, bushfires, that kind of stuff. She said, well, local people are used to this, happens all the time. So that's the other thing, right? We have hot summers, bushfires happen all of the time, that kind of stuff. Honestly, it's incredible. But shoot, what's your next one?
Yeah, well, the other one, which kind of ties into what you just said, is and this comes up a lot on social media. For some reason, I don't know why, and I don't want to malign anybody in the audience here, but there's a disproportionate amount of deniers called Terry. It's just a reality, okay? I can't change that. So Terry says, I went to Mallorca 5 years ago, and it was hotter than this.
Okay, yeah.
What do you say to Terry, Dale?
That's that anecdotal approach, isn't it? My own experience, my own opinion type thing. I want to know how many Terrys we've got in the audience. Actually, I mean actual Terrys, not deniers, just Terrys.
There's 3 men just left at the back. So a trio of Terrys.
We ain't got no Terrys. Maybe you're right.
What do you call it?
Maybe you're right.
A collective noun for Terrys. Please don't answer that. That's but yeah, that is a common one that comes up, that it's been hotter before. And the other one, which I suppose we should just dovetail into this, is that, well, hang on, why is some parts of the world having this heat wave, but we're not? So in Italy and Greece and southern Europe, Spain as well, it's been in the 40s. But if you go sort of anything above Paris, for example, then they're not having one. It's 20 degrees and it's actually quite cold.
Yeah, I mean, what can you say? It's not a pattern of weather, is it? I mean, it's happening all over the place. In America, they've got the extremes in their own country. They've got floods and droughts.
Canada, for example.
Yeah, and I mean, you just got to look at the collective experience of the world in terms of extreme weather events, and something's wrong. But the data says something's wrong. The data is very clear, and you can't argue with the science. So, I think we should just make it illegal. China, of course, is not on the list of...
China is the other big one, isn't it? Yeah, what about China?
Yeah, I mean, which is a great one. So it's not like denial of the climate crisis. This is a deflection. This one is, what can we do about it? We're 1% of global emissions, and China is like half or something. I don't know. And if they don't change, then we can't solve this problem. And it's a great argument to put up, right? Because it's very persuasive. And I mean, there's severe logic in there, actually. If China don't change, then we can't do it. And of course, the answer to that is China are a climate superpower, actually. If you look at what they're doing, they've got to 50% green electricity on the grid. I was telling this fella on Talk Sport yesterday, because that was his last card. Like, but what about China? 50% green electricity on the grid. They've installed more solar panels than the rest of the world put together. 80% of the solar panels that we install outside of China are made in China. 98% of buses on the road in China are electric already, and they're making tens of millions of electric cars. The pace of change in China is incredible. They're 5 years ahead of their targets, while we're about 10 years behind our own targets. And quite frankly, they're a climate superpower, and we're laggards. So when somebody says to me, "What about China?" I'm like, "Well, what about China? They're doing a fantastic job, actually." And it should be, "What about Britain? What's Britain doing?"
Good point. I know there was a piece, I think it was on Radio 4 this morning, that was dealing with how relatively well Britain were doing. We were kind of going in the right direction, but seemed to have stalled. Does that sound about right to you?
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, we've got all the right policies, targets. We signed up to the Paris Accord and all that kind of stuff. And then we got Boris Johnson for Prime Minister, didn't we? And he said all the right things and did all the wrong things. And Sunak is continuing in that vein. I think it's worse with Sunak, actually. I think he's so desperate to get elected that he's turning his back on the science and the economics of the green economy. And I think he's promoting fossil fuels in the North Sea for purely self-interested reasons, to try and get re-elected, to create a culture war, a divide in our country on this issue of the climate, about which there should be no divide and no disagreement. What he's doing flies in the face not just of the science, but also the economics, because the OBR, the Office for Budget Responsibility, reported to him 2 weeks ago now, I think it might have been last week, and they told him it will cost twice as much to stick with fossil fuels as it will cost to transition to green energy. It'll cost our economy twice as much. There's no economic argument for what he's doing in the North Sea, but there is a political one. And I think that's a terrible thing.
Do you think that Sunak, I mean, he's not going to be there for much longer, clearly, even if he took it to its longest possible time frame. They'll be out of power 18 months, 2 years. So in that time, it's unlikely they're going to start. I mean, he talks about drilling, because you're right. It's a bit like the fracking thing. I mean, I don't know where the fracking argument's gone, because we enjoyed talking about fracking. Because we had a theory, didn't we? The only reason why some people kind of on that part of the political spectrum were really into fracking was because of the word fracking. Because it sounds like fracking.
Yeah.
It sounds like, go on, frack it. It's like, it's got a hard onomatopoeic kind of sense to it. Fracking, we love it. Drill, get down there, frack till your life's over. It was that kind of sense, that real almost evangelical belief that fracking was somehow the answer to the world's problems. And it didn't take much of a Google search to establish that even if you were loosely in favor of trying it, there was no longevity in it apart from anything else.
Well, that's right. That's one of the problems really with relying on fossil fuels. So the Conservatives are telling everybody now that drilling in the North Sea will lower energy bills, but it can't do that. Half of our gas comes from the North Sea now, and in the energy crisis, we paid 10 times more for it than we used to because we allow global markets to set the price. So it doesn't matter how many fossil fuels we make here, it won't lower our energy bills. And the second thing they say is that it will give us energy security, but fossil fuels are a single-use fuel. You burn them and they're gone. In the North Sea now, the average time it takes to go looking for oil and producing it is 28 years, right, from start to producing oil. And these fields are empty within 2 decades. The ones that are being licensed now are supposed to come on stream in 4 years' time, but they'll be gone in 20 years. There's no security in that. Whereas renewable energy, of course, is a forever fuel. We invest in the infrastructure, we build it, and it's there forever. And there's no global price for electricity made from the wind and the sun. So we get to price it here. We can eradicate fuel poverty and have permanently low energy bills and proper energy security. And, by the way, fight the climate crisis.
I mean, just to go back to the point about, I think it was, God, do you remember Liz Truss? Do you remember her? She was great.
Yeah, she was.
Liz, affectionately known to her friends as Terry. Did you know that?
No, I didn't.
Terry Truss. So Terry Truss said she would return to fracking in her 3 hours as Prime Minister. Are you saying that you think Rishi Sunak is playing the same kind of card? There's that sort of part of the gallery that say we want drilling for oil. It just sounds well-hard, and it sounds like it's something that we should be doing, and it's a bit Trumpy because he says that kind of thing quite a lot. But whether he'll actually do it is the point. And the smart money says that he won't because he can't, even if he wanted to, because he won't be there long enough, and the time frame doesn't exist. Do you think Rishi Sunak actually believes it, or is he just saying it to appease that kind of part of his party?
I don't think he can believe it. I don't think he's stupid enough to be able to look at the science. Well, maybe he is, all right, but I don't think so. to be able to look at the science and the economics, I think he understands stuff. Like, was he from the world of banking or something like that? I don't know. I think he understands money at least. And all of the indicators are very clear. For every pound that we invest in renewable energy, we get twice the GDP growth that we would if we invested it in fossil fuels, and 2.5 times as many jobs. So even the unions are in the wrong place on this, because recently they've been complaining about Labour policy and saying that they want more North Sea oil and gas drilling, and actually they want to bring back fracking because there are jobs in that. But they're wrong. They don't understand the numbers, because there are twice as many jobs, more than twice as many jobs in renewable energy, and permanent jobs, forever jobs, than in fossil fuels. So I think Rishi Sunak knows what he's doing. It's a completely calculated move. It's divisive, like Brexit, and green issues and the green economy have become the newest enemy in the Tories' forever culture war.
Which brings us to your new best friend, Keir Starmer. And there's been a lot of talk about...
I know that laugh. I know who that is.
So it's quite funny because I've known you for a few years, Dale, and when I hear Keir Starmer interviewed and asked about you, I always find that kind of, wow, he's being asked about Dale. This is interesting that, from where you began, constructing a windmill all those years ago, thinking, I wonder where this will go, to what you're doing now. And here's essentially the next Prime Minister being asked about your input into them. According to the Daily Mail, and I don't care what anybody says, it is the bastion of truth, the Daily Mail. It is the only place you will find, if you really want to know what's going on in the world, you have to read the Daily. I can't even say it seriously. But according to the Daily Mail, you're essentially funding the Labour Party. You're funding Just Stop Oil. We'll come to that in a moment. But Keir Starmer's Labour Party, and you've thrown a few quid in their direction, that's public knowledge. How will they be so significantly different to the Conservatives? Because they might be different, but it's got to be significant, hasn't it? It's got to be seismic.
Yeah, I was answering this question to the New Statesman last week, actually, and he was really kind of prodding me with his questions about what Labour will do. Was I happy with the the rowing back, his words, on the 28 billion a year commitment, for example, to spend on the green economy. Wasn't happy with this, wasn't confident in this, that, and the other. And he said, you seem very relaxed about what Labour may do when they get into power. And I said, yes, because the Tories are so fucking bad, I said, excuse my language, so fucking bad that whatever Labour do can only be a shed load better. So I'm very relaxed about it.
But if you're, I mean, I think that is probably just factually correct, yes. But it needs to be, it's no good just being a bit better, is it, is my point. They've got to be radical. They're
going to be massively less worse, which is, I think, one thing. You know what I mean? They do believe in the green economy. I mean, I have a positive way of looking at this as well. But if you look around our country, you know, the economy is on its knees, along with the NHS. You know, we've got crises everywhere. The Conservatives in 13 years have dealt with nothing. They've spent 13 years infighting like ferrets in a sack over who's going to be the next leader. And you know, the country's gone to rack and ruin, quite frankly. I think Labour will put that right. They'll run the country properly, but also they do get the green agenda. I've talked to a few of the shadow cabinet members, and I believe that they believe in it. And I've seen some of their plans, you know, the public ones. I haven't seen anything secret. And you know, you can see that at the heart of that is a genuine understanding of the opportunity that the green economy is. And this is an interesting thing. We for some time now, have not been arguing about the climate crisis. I mean Ecotricity, and I think Labour have started to do the same thing. We're not trying to justify green measures like green energy, electric cars, and that kind of stuff off the back of the climate crisis anymore. It's a simple economic argument. It's massively more expensive not to do this stuff. And that's a wonderful place to be. We've seen the technology become so cheap that we're in a place now where it's a simple economic argument. We get much more for our money if we spend it on green stuff than we do the old stuff, the brown stuff, fossils. And the climate becomes icing on the cake. And that's a very different way to frame the argument to one we've been having for the last, you know, couple of decades.
Why have they not? And again, this is something that we've talked about on the podcast. In America, it's a small but perfectly formed contingent of Republicans who are, you know, Republicans for climate change or whatever it's called, who get everything you've just said, and they've worked out on the basis that whether you buy into all the finer points of every argument, the fact is, from a commercial perspective, from a jobs perspective, there's gold there in their green hills, as they say. And they've worked out that it's, you don't get a second chance at this stuff. So go for it, and it will actually be financially more beneficial in terms of jobs and the economy and pound for pound and all the rest, dollar for dollar. You would think more, somebody like Rishi Sunak, again, say what you like about him, he's obviously not a stupid bloke. What is it that they're all missing, and why are they missing it?
Honestly, I don't know. I do think it's an attempt at a new front on the culture war for them. I think it's a desperate attempt to separate themselves from Labour at the next election. I mean, the polls are disastrous for them right now, and I think they're just desperate to try and claw some of that back by creating this super divisive issue, and with dishonesty as well, because it's dishonest to say that fossil fuels will lower our energy bills or give us energy security, or that the green transition is too expensive, which is the other thing they keep saying. We can't afford it. We have to slow it down. When the opposite is the truth. The longer we take, the more expensive it is. They know that's true. So I think it's just desperate. And, it's politics. And it's really unfortunate when the party in government will put their own interests above the interests of the country. I think there's something completely wrong about that.
In terms of Labour, one of the arguments that the Conservatives are trying to put forward, and I mean, it's even by their own standards, I think they're making a hash and a complete mess of this. But what they're trying to say is Labour, essentially, it's old Labour. They're dominated by the unions. They're funded by Just Stop Oil, and Just Stop Oil are funded by, what's his name again? Oh, yes, Dale Vince. So you're the man behind Just Stop Oil. You're therefore the man behind the Labour Party. You're all in it together, a bunch of dodgy lefties, and that's what Rishi Sunak thinks of you.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's happening. He sent a fundraiser out a couple of weeks ago in which he named me, called me a zealot and something else. I don't know what it was. And he wrote this line, which I thought was incredible. It said, while Labour are relying on money from people like this, we rely on money from ordinary people like you. And I thought, wow, right? Whoever thought that was true? And he signed it, Rishi Sunak, Prime Minister of the UK. My favourite prod of him on social media was say he had to put his job title in there because a lot of people don't know what the fuck he does.
So ordinary people are funding the Tories, and big business are funding Labour. Right. So, I mean, if you're going to tell a lie, tell a big one. So what about the Just Stop Oil thing? Because, of course, this has been, I mean, in terms of campaigning, forget what anybody thinks about inconvenience and the like, but if your aim is to be high profile, if your aim is to make the front pages, if your aim is to really rile the Daily Mail, it's arguably one of the most successful campaigns of recent times, if not ever, because these people have pitched up at Wimbledon. I mean, the Wimbledon thing was interesting. Well, it's just worth mentioning the Wimbledon, because everyone said, oh, yes, it's always somebody called Tarquin who went to a private school. That's usually the person. Well, the guy at Wimbledon was about 87, wasn't he? This old duffer. He ran onto the court, and there he went, and he ran around a little bit, and he didn't mind being dragged away, and nothing was violent, nothing happened. Right. But, of course, there is an argument that some people, not unreasonably put forward, that actually Just Stop Oil are crossing a line, gluing yourself to the road or stopping traffic. It's just not the way to get people on side.
Yeah, that's right. It's a very common point made in media, I would say. I've been having these discussions for at least a month on air. And it's always the same old thing. And I get to a point where I say, look, guys, you live in a media bubble, right? You're telling me that Just Stop Oil, the campaign isn't working, that the people are this particular stereotype, that they're unpopular. You're telling me all this stuff, but you don't know. You haven't been out there, right? I've been out on the streets. I joined a demo around Parliament Square, led a demo according to the Daily Mail, which is quite funny. And the backstory to that is they stuck me on the front page with this fake kind of funding story about a month ago. And rather than be kind of cowed by this right-wing kind of intense interest, I decided to go on a march around Parliament Square and do a bit of disruption, and then flick the V's to the Daily Mail, literally and metaphorically. I shot a little video of me doing it, and then we ran a funding campaign for 48 hours. I doubled everything that they could raise, and then the guy that made Don't Look Up, I think it's Don't Look Up, not Just Look Up, is it? Whichever it is. Adam McKay. He did the same thing. He trebled it for another 48 hours. And between us, we raised £1 million. And I'm like, the Daily Mail did that, actually. I granted them the credit for that. And I did bump into one of the reporters, and he said to me, it doesn't matter what I print. He said, you'll use it against me and raise money. I thought brilliant.
Do you think the Daily Mail are secretly on side?
Yeah, I mean, they like news, don't they? Just Stop Oil makes news. But this is a constant theme of the argument. Honestly, all of the time. The media, they say to me, it's not working, is it? And I say, but here we are talking about it again, right? I did an interview with Tonight. I think it aired a couple of days ago. I haven't seen it yet. But at the end of the interview, the lady talking to me said, Climate Majority Project. It's a new project designed to give a voice to the silent majority of people. And I joined it. I signed an open letter and said it's a great idea. People that don't want to block roads, don't want to get arrested and all that kind of stuff, but need a voice. And she said it launched last week, didn't it? But I didn't see any press coverage. And she's like, oh, I've just made your argument for you, haven't I? Because my argument is, the more you disrupt, the more you make the news, the more you have a channel and a platform to talk about what we actually need to talk about, which is there's a climate crisis, is driven by fossil fuels, and it's madness to drill in the North Sea.
But you've previously... I remember we did an interview on the radio where, what happened to Extinction Rebellion? I mean, is it kind of morphed into Just Stop Oil? Is it a separate thing? Do we know?
They're still around.
Because you didn't agree with all of their methods, did you? And I remember we had a debate between you and Gail.
Yeah, Gail Badbrook, yeah. Thank you.
And that was when there was a lot of that kind of window smashing going on, and in banks and tapping windows with hammers and shattering these. Yeah. You disagreed with that.
I thought it was a bad move. It's violence. It's a form of violence, for one thing, against property, not people. But it's very easy for the media to portray it, badly in a negative light. And I just think that would do more harm than good.
Yeah.
I'm in that camp on that issue. I remember that one because she at the same time, we talked about food, didn't we? Food, the cow in the room of the climate crisis. So many people get the climate crisis and want to see something done, but they eat animals. And Gail's one of those people, and I was shocked when I learned that. I'm like, how can you do that? And she argued actually that there's a role for a better kind of meat, and it's okay, we can still keep killing animals, which is a bit shocking to me.
Didn't we also discover that she drove a diesel Volvo as well? I think
I have no idea.
Possibly not the right person in the job at the time. I don't know, but there was. Just let's take up that point about food, because you're again. Sorry to keep repeating there's something we talk about on the podcast a lot, but you're very passionate that food is not just a kind of side point to this debate, but it's absolutely crucial to the discussion on climate.
It's the key to everything that we need to. It's one of the keys. I mean, energy, transport, and food are the three big things that we have to change. And food, the way we make it at the moment, isn't just like the second biggest cause of the climate crisis, and it's like polluting our rivers, with runoff from intensive animal agriculture and that kind of stuff. But if we were to give up eating animals and go plant-based, we'd free up 75% of all farmland. This is land that we've taken from nature. It's caused a massive decline of nature in our country. And so by changing our diets, we can take one of the biggest steps that we can take. Personally, it's probably the biggest we can all take to fight the climate crisis. We can bring wildlife back to our country and actually improve our own health as well, because most of the chronic diseases that affect us in older life are caused by eating animal products. And of course, off to the side of that, there's 1 billion animals a year in our country that are born, raised brutally and killed brutally every year for a food choice that we don't need to make. So there's an animal rights issue here as well.
And obviously, again, this is kind of, I suppose, vegan bingo, much like the previous game. But it always comes up. I had the very conversation this morning, actually, about choices of food. If you're a vegan, it wasn't that long ago that if you were a vegetarian, you went into a restaurant, you had to say, do you have a vegetarian menu? And then somebody would go out the back and probably type one up, say salad, and then come back out and go, there you go, you can have a salad if you want, thanks. But now you don't have to do that, because there's lots of imaginative and really tasty vegetarian foods, and they sit there proudly on the main menu with everything else. But the vegan one, that's still, for many people, a bit tricky. But there is one food product that people don't even associate with being a vegan. But there it is. Chips are vegan, everybody. Chips! The food of gods is vegan. And nobody really makes that association. Everybody loves a chip, doesn't it?
It's funny, isn't it? This occurred, of course, in football, in the world of football.
Yeah.
We'd just recruited Big Dunk to be Forest Green's new head coach. This was like January time, something like that. And we were on the pitch doing an interview with Sky, and they were pressing him about all kinds of stuff. And they said to him, have you eaten vegan food? He said he didn't think he had. And to the side of him, I just said, chips are vegan. And he went, chips are vegan?
Yeah.
And that was it. The moment was born. And there we have it. Chips are vegan. I'm a big fan of chips. But you're right. It's way easier to eat without eating animals nowadays. Every supermarket, every cafe, every restaurant, they'll all cater for that. And it's a movement. It's a movement of people. And the more we educate people about the suffering of the animals, the human health impact and the climate impact, and the choice, actually, the easiness of the choice and what it would bring back wildlife-wise in our country. I mean, there's so many reasons. It's almost too good to be true. It's a simple change. Just stop eating animals.
Will that not be... I mean, will that just ultimately take, consumer pressure? Because there's always the basically I'm a vegetarian. But basically I'm a vegetarian. You hear that a lot. Basically I'm a vegetarian. I do like a bacon sandwich on a Sunday, though. It's like, well, you're not a vegetarian then, are you? Yeah. But that kind of, until you get to that tipping point where it's that there is, money essentially for business in being vegan.
Yeah, well, I think two things there. Firstly, the money exists and business can see that. When Greggs brought out their first vegan sausage roll, they were blown away by the response. And now they've got a whole bunch of vegan stuff, and lots of people have followed suit. But on that question of, I'm a vegetarian, but I like a bacon sandwich, I think it's really important that we don't make plant-based eating, not eating animals, veganism, whatever you want to call it, we don't make it exclusive or difficult. We don't make it look like something you have to be completely in or completely out of. So if somebody says to me, I just eat a bacon sandwich on a Sunday, I'd say, well, fair play, right? Because that's making a big difference.
So, yeah, and we've discussed this before, haven't we, with all manner of initiatives, whether it's recycling or veganism. Everybody doesn't have to do everything immediately.
That's right.
If everybody did a bit, the knock-on effect, the ripple effect is absolutely huge.
That's right. It's probably one of those unspoken bingo things that puts people off doing anything. The idea that they've got to do everything or they must do nothing because something in between will be called out for hypocrisy or contradiction or just the stuff we're talking about. It's a constant theme in conversations that I have, particularly with, let's say, more prominent people like footballers, for example. They want to speak out on this issue of the climate crisis, but they're afraid the media will go for them and say, but you do this as well as that. as well as saying that, you do this, which is the classic of our right-wing media. But, I think if you can just embrace the fact that we're all on a path and nobody's perfect, then just carry on and do whatever it is you can do, and just say that to people that, want to criticize you for something you don't do.
Yeah. And in terms of you personally, Dale, I mean, you've had, what is by any measure this incredible journey from the windmill. I mean, it's worth for those I think most people in this audience probably are aware of, kind of where you came from, but you've lived in unconventional places, and you've lived life on the road, as it were. But just tell us about that windmill, how that, what was going on there. Not many people in their younger years wake up with an epiphany to build a windmill.
Well, I was 30 by then, and I'd spent a decade on the road, living in buses and trucks, and a thing called a bender, which is like an English igloo made of hazel poles in an igloo shape, covered in a tarpaulin that literally fell off the back of a lorry. And it was a great place to live, and a great way to live. But at the end of this decade, I had a little windmill powering my trailer, and so I understood how wind energy worked and saw the first big windmills built in Cornwall. It was the beginning of this modern era of wind energy, and I was living on a hill in Stroud. I knew it was windy because that's how I powered myself. And I thought, well, I could spend another 10 years living like this, or I could drop in and try and build a big windmill on this hill. And that's what I did. It took me 5 years. I had to learn a lot of stuff and fight a lot of battles, and then built this first windmill Friday 13th of December, actually, 1996. And then Ecotricity kind of grew out of that. And our first mission was energy, to change the way that was made in Britain, because it was the biggest single cause of climate emissions. And in the 2000s, we went looking for the second and third and found transport and food, and found this amazing fact that energy, transport and food together are 80% of everybody's personal carbon footprint. It's just about how we power our homes, how we travel, and what we eat. And I think that's a wonderful, simple, empowering message, because we've got more agency in this than we really think.
Should we go back to denial bingo?
Yeah, sure. What you got?
What happens when the wind doesn't blow?
Windmills don't make electricity. But the counterpoint to that is it's not very often not windy at all. There's always some wind, and modern windmills will make some electricity. And it's very rare also for there to be no wind across the entire country at the same time. It's even more rare for it to happen across an entire continent like Europe. And we are interconnected. And as we, all of us, increase the amount of green energy, including wind energy, on our grids, we will be swapping it between countries like we do now, with fossil or nuclear powered electricity that is swapped around Europe and stuff like that. So, I mean, windmills don't make electricity when there's no wind, but it's a very rare occurrence for none at all. And usually when there's no wind, there's sun. And, that's the other big renewable option that we have, the wind and the sun. We have enough to power our country onshore, something like 10 times over. They're super cheap. They need no public money. We're building solar projects now with no support from the government at all. They're super fast. You can build them in about 12 months. And they're the cleanest form of energy that we know. And the national grid says that we can have a grid running 100% on green energy. And that's my answer to anybody that says that the grid can't cope. Right? The national grid says they can.
And that is the end of part one of this WOMAD special. In the second part, released next week, it's the Q&A, questions from the audience at WOMAD 2023. Join us then.
Zero Carbon
East of.